Let me ask you something. What happens when a rising nation finally says no to the biggest power on the planet? Because today, the world witnessed something that will shake every boardroom, every embassy, every global leader awake. The problem is simple. For decades, global power moved in only one direction. One country leading, others following. But now, that routine has been broken. India has rejected a major U.S. trade offer, and that single decision is about to rearrange alliances, disrupt expectations, and rewrite the future of global influence. And the real question is, are we ready for a world where the balance of power is no longer predictable? Stay with me, because what comes next will shock you. India's decision to reject the U.S. trade offer is far more than a diplomatic disagreement. It is a loud declaration that the global hierarchy is no longer fixed. For decades, the world has operated under a familiar pattern. Major powers propose, rising nations accept, and the cycle continues. But this moment breaks that rhythm. When a country that once followed now chooses to stand firm, it forces everyone watching to rethink what they believed was permanent. The reason this refusal is historic is because it challenges the idea that influence flows in only one direction. It shows that economic strength, strategic confidence, and national identity have evolved to a point where saying no becomes an act of self-definition instead of defiance. This decision creates a ripple effect far beyond the negotiation room. Other nations, especially those navigating between large global players, begin to see that choices are not limited to compliance or competition. There is a third option, independence. By declining an offer from a major power, India demonstrates that rising nations now possess the leverage to protect their priorities and shape their own economic direction. It reflects a shift from passive participation to active leadership. The world views events like this with surprise because they disrupt expectations. When predictability ends, curiosity and uncertainty rise, markets respond, analysts speculate, governments reassess. But under all of this reaction is a powerful truth. Balance only shifts when someone is bold enough to disrupt it. India's refusal didn't just change a trade conversation. It signaled a shift in global confidence, especially among countries that aspire to grow without compromise. It revealed that influence can no longer be dictated from the top down, and that the future of global power will be shaped equally by those who rise, not just by those who already lead. India's choice to stand firm and decline the U.S. trade offer reflects a deeper truth about how nations grow into their strength. Real power doesn't come from accepting every opportunity placed before you. It comes from understanding which opportunities move you forward and which ones hold you back. By choosing long-term vision over short-term benefits, India demonstrated a level of strategic confidence that only comes when a country knows exactly where it is headed. This wasn't an emotional response or a symbolic gesture. It was a calculated decision driven by clarity, self-respect, and the belief that sustainable growth requires discipline, not dependence. For years, India has been building its economic and technological foundation. Slowly, steadily, and deliberately, it has developed the capacity to negotiate from a position of power rather than pressure. This refusal confirms that India is no longer operating from a mindset of limitation. Instead, it approaches the global table with the knowledge that it brings value. Value strong enough to stand on its own, value that doesn't need to bend just to secure approval. That kind of confidence sends a powerful message to the world. A nation that knows its worth cannot be easily swayed. What makes this moment truly significant is that it shows the world a different form of strength, not the loud kind, not the aggressive kind, but the kind that comes from conviction, the kind that says, we will not compromise our future for immediate rewards. It takes courage to walk away from a deal that appears beneficial on the surface. It takes even more courage to trust your long-term strategy over external pressure. India's decision highlights that strength isn't always shown by saying yes. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in the ability to say no and mean it. India's refusal delivers a powerful message to every emerging nation watching closely. The global landscape is no longer reserved for a select few. For decades, developing countries were expected to follow instructions, accept unequal deals, and adjust their ambitions to fit someone else's agenda. But moments like this reshape that narrative. When a rising nation stands on its own terms, it proves that growth is not defined by who supports you, but by how confidently you define your own direction. This single decision becomes a symbol of empowerment for countries that have long been told their choices must align with the expectations of larger powers. The message is simple but transformative. You can negotiate without fear. You can map your future without borrowing someone else's blueprint. You can build alliances that respect your interests instead of limiting them. Emerging nations often feel trapped between competing global forces, unsure of how to assert their independence without triggering consequences. India's stance shows that independence is not rebellion. It is a mature, necessary step in national development. It demonstrates that rising economies now possess the strategic leverage, economic capability, and diplomatic weight to make decisions that prioritize their people, their industries, and their long-term vision. This example encourages other developing countries to reevaluate how they perceive their place in the world. Instead of seeing themselves as followers, they can begin to see themselves as equal participants. Instead of viewing global offers as obligations, they can analyze them through the lens of national benefit. Instead of accepting terms out of pressure, they can approach negotiations with clarity and composure. India's decision becomes a reminder that confidence grows when a nation stops waiting for approval and starts demanding respect. And in doing so, they open the door for countless others to rise with the same courage, the same certainty, and the same belief in their future. India's refusal disrupts a long-standing pattern in global politics where major powers set the tone and everyone else adjusts. For years, the international system operated almost like a predictable script. One nation makes the offer, others follow the expected path, and the balance of influence remains unchanged. But when a country as significant and rapidly growing as India decides to step outside that script, it breaks more than a negotiation. It breaks an assumption. It challenges the belief that the world's strongest nations will always dictate the pace and direction of global decisions. This single moment forces diplomats, economists, and strategists to confront a new reality where rising powers are no longer content with being predictable players. The disruption lies not in the refusal itself, but in what it represents. It signals that the era of unquestioned dominance is fading. It shows that global influence is becoming more shared, more competitive, and more dynamic. When a country confidently rejects an offer that most nations would have felt compelled to accept, it becomes clear that the traditional distribution of power is being questioned. The balance that once seemed immovable now feels vulnerable. This shift creates an atmosphere of uncertainty, an uncertainty that compels nations to analyze every move more carefully, rethink their alliances, and prepare for a world where assumptions no longer guarantee outcomes. India's action sets off a chain reaction. Other countries begin to reassess their positions. World leaders start recalibrating their strategies. Analysts dig deeper into what this means for the next decade. This is because power structures, once disrupted, don't simply return to their old shape. They adjust. They stretch, they evolve, and this evolution marks a transition toward a global system where influence is earned, not imposed. By defying predictability, India has reshaped the conversation, proving that the world's future will be shaped not only by established powers, but equally by those bold enough to challenge the routine. India's stance marks the beginning of a new kind of global relationship, one where decisions are not shaped by pressure or obligation but by clarity, equality, and intention. For years, international deals often carried an unspoken imbalance. Larger powers dictated terms while developing nations adapted. But the moment India chose not to bend to expectations, it revealed that the rules of engagement are changing. Modern alliances are no longer about one side holding all the leverage. They are about finding common ground that respects both parties. India's decision shows that nations are now willing to walk away if a partnership does not align with their long-term vision, even if the offer comes from a traditionally dominant player. This approach requires a mindset rooted in confidence rather than dependence. It demonstrates that genuine progress comes from making decisions based on national priorities, not external pressure. When a country engages fully in its own development, strengthening its economy, building internal resilience, expanding technological capability, it reaches a point where it no longer needs to accept terms that don't serve its interests. India's move reflects that maturity. It shows that the era of silent compliance is fading, and a new era of bold, self-directed negotiation is emerging. This is the kind of decision-making that inspires leaders, businesses, and citizens to believe in a future shaped by their own choices. Countries around the world watch decisions like this closely because they reveal a path forward. It is a model of how to stand firm without being hostile, how to negotiate without fear, and how to protect national dignity while still participating actively in global affairs. India's action sets a powerful example. The strongest alliances are built when both sides bring confidence, not desperation. And when a nation chooses principle over pressure, it signals to the world that it is ready to engage on equal terms, not as a follower, but as a partner. India's decision marks the early stages of a profound global transition, one that doesn't happen overnight, but begins with a single bold step. The world has long been shaped by a familiar hierarchy where a few dominant nations held most of the influence, guiding economic, political, and strategic directions. But when a rising power challenges that order by asserting its independence, the old structure begins to shift. India's refusal is not an isolated act. It is a signal that the future will not look like the past. It represents a new chapter where influence is distributed more broadly, shaped by nations that are growing rapidly, investing in their capabilities, and making decisions driven by self-confidence rather than external pressure. This shift isn't dramatic at first glance, but its impact is deep. When a country demonstrates the strength to turn down a powerful partner, it sends a message that the global stage is changing. Other nations begin to recognize that they, too, may possess more power than they realized. They start questioning long-held assumptions and exploring more balanced ways of navigating international relationships. This creates a ripple that gradually turns into a wave, moving the world toward a more multipolar environment where no single nation dominates the narrative. What makes this moment especially meaningful is that it marks the beginning of a trend rather than a one-time event. Rising economies across Asia, Africa, South America, and the Middle East are developing faster, investing more strategically, and gaining greater geopolitical leverage. India's decision empowers this movement. It demonstrates that influence can be earned through resilience, growth, and a clear national identity. And as more countries follow a similar path, the traditional centers of power will have to evolve. This is how global shifts truly begin, not with loud declarations, but with decisive actions that challenge the old order. India's move shows that the balance of power in the decades ahead will be shaped by nations willing to be bold, intentional, and unafraid to choose their own direction. So today, we stand at a turning point, a moment that doesn't belong to one nation, one leader, or one negotiation. This moment belongs to the future. India's refusal is not about defiance, it's about direction. It's about a country choosing to rise on its own terms and proving that real strength comes from clarity, confidence, and the courage to say no when it matters. This single choice has shaken assumptions, opened new possibilities, and shown the world that the balance of power is no longer fixed in old models. It is evolving. It is expanding. It is shifting toward nations bold enough to take control of their destiny. And this moment will be remembered not for the deal that didn't happen, but for the future it set in motion. Now it's time to ask yourself, what are you doing with the choices in front of you? Are you accepting what's handed to you because it's easy? Or because it's right? Are you following a path someone else designed? Or building your own because the world is rewriting its future? And so can you. Stand firm in your values. Make decisions that protect your long-term vision. Don't compromise your potential for short-term comfort. And above all, learn the most powerful lesson from this moment. Strength isn't granted, it's claimed. If a nation can reshape its future with one bold decision, imagine what you can do with yours. Thank you for listening, for thinking deeply, and for being part of a moment that reflects the power of courage and clarity. Remember, your voice, your choices, and your direction matter more than you realize. Stay strong, stay focused, and stay committed to creating a future that belongs to you. Thank you. And until next time, keep moving forward.